can you go to the next slide? So that's a quick introduction to who we are at GenEon, who GenEon is. One request we'd like to make is that everybody go and unmute if you possibly can, so that way we wouldn't get any background noise. And also, if you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat feature, and it's indicated here on your screen how you can access that chat feature in Zoom, and then we'll try to respond to those questions as best as we possibly can. We'll try to get to all of the questions. If we can get to all of the questions during this presentation, we'll try to get to you afterwards. With that, I'd like to introduce to you Steve Ashkins, who will be facilitating the presentation. As many of you know, Steve is often thought of as the father of green cleaning. Steve serves as the president of the Ashkin Group and is the executive director of the Green Cleaner Network. In addition to that, Steve is also one of the founding members of the Green Building Council and is on the technical committee, and also serves in the International Well Building Institute that runs the Well Building Association. Steve is also on the technical committee for sustainability reporting. He also served on an advisory board for ISSA, and they're about to launch a sustainability initiative for the cleaning industry. Steve has also received numerous awards, including National Performance Review for his launching of the President Green Chemistry Challenge Award. He also received the Excellence Award from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, for his work to protect children from environmental threats. With that, I'd like to introduce you to Steve Ashkin.
Well, thank you, Sid. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I also want to thank all of you that are spending some time with us. I really do hope that over the next hour, it will be a good use of your time. So as Sid suggested, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. We'll absolutely do our best to answer them. And again, let's make this as good a use of your time as absolutely possible. So here's my agenda for today. I'm going to cover a number of different things in the time I have. We're going to begin talking about green cleaning using the LEED roadmap. And then I really want to get into more of a lengthy discussion about the issues around sustainability. And as you said, I've divided that up into a few different buckets. One is I want to give you a real sense of why I truly believe that sustainability is an issue that we need to be paying attention to from a business perspective, how it's going to affect our business, when it's coming, what's going to be required, and candidly, why we should be paying attention to it now. I'm going to do a little bit of a discussion on future issues, and of course, no presentation would be complete without some specific action items, things that you can do that I hope you'll try to put into practice. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. The first part of the presentation is about the U.S. Green Building Council and the LEED rating system. And I'm going to make some assumptions that most of you on the video today are familiar with the USGBC. So forgive me if I don't give a long speech about who they are. Suffice it to say that they're the big dog in the green building certification space. They are a player. As you see from the slide, they have certified over 130,000 buildings around the world, 100,000 of which are in North America. So they have a huge footprint. And candidly, depending on who you work with, this may or may not be relevant, to be honest with you. They focus on corporate headquarters. They focus on downtown facilities, competitive high-rise marketplaces. They focus on universities. They focus on corporate campuses. They focus on the big buildings that, from the cleaning industry's perspective, we would all love to do business with. And I mention it like that because you don't see many, mom and pop beauty parlors or barbershops that are getting LEED certified in the local strip mall. That's really not their market. Their market are the big companies that are very influential. So when we talk about the number of buildings that have been certified, there's a huge spillover effect with lots of other people following the LEED rating system. And the way the system works is the more points you get, it's a point-based system, the better the rating, either it can be certified silver, gold, or platinum. And the credits or points themselves are either prerequisites, which is a must-have. You don't get a point for it, but if you don't do a prerequisite, you can't get certified no matter how many points you have. And from the cleaning industry's perspective, this is incredibly valuable to us because there is a prerequisite on cleaning. They also have all the credits that are all the different things you can do, like purchasing products, and we'll get into some definitions or more information about that. And then even for new construction and other projects where they're not actually cleaning the building yet, these projects can still get an innovation credit, an innovation point, by putting together a green cleaning plan. So it has a huge impact on all these buildings. And it's estimated that over 90% of all the LEED certified buildings are doing green cleaning. It's one of the most highly coveted or used credit in the entire rating system. And then you see at the end, there's pilot credits, which are new things they're testing. And there's also a pilot credit that we developed for them relative to COVID and cleaning and disinfecting. Currently, we're updating the rating system. And one of the most important things I can tell you about that is we're increasing the number of points for cleaning from 1 to 3 points, which is a huge increase, right? Huge. And it just will further have people pay attention to what's going on relative to cleaning, especially when you think about to earn a point. Some things are easy, like you can change your toilet paper. Other things like reducing your energy consumption may require you to put in a new lighting system or put in a new chiller, a new boiler plant, put in new controllers. So some things are really expensive and hard to do, whereas cleaning is part of the low-hanging fruit, which is one of the reasons why everyone does it. And ultimately, as you see, I look at the requirements in LEED as the roadmap to green cleaning. Everything's there, chemicals, paper, equipment, and we'll go through that. So that's who the LEED folks are. When they develop their requirements, candidly, they take this stuff really seriously. For cleaning, we highly rely on third-party certifications. Our focus is on protecting health, including those of our cleaning personnel, and using industry best practices. And they have an added focus in the last few years on performance. Not just checking the box that the product was certified by Green Seal or Safer Choice, but to actually start measuring cleaning performance. And the same thing is true in other areas, whether it's lighting, whether it's all the other things that they pay attention to. How do they really look at it from a performance perspective? And then also to really encourage innovation, including products like those from GenEon. So in the next 5 slides, I'm just going to quickly go through the requirements found in LEED. And the first is relative to product selection. And to me, and much of this has to do with the new updates that we're working on today. So I'm not going through and showing you all the requirements for glass cleaners and hard floor care and carpet cleaners. Please, if you want that information, please feel free to talk to Sid or reach out to me and we can go through all of that. And of course, all of this can be found online. But the first part is to really focus, especially relative to COVID, which is on everyone's mind, or at least certainly has been over the last few years, is to use disinfectants that are on EPA's list 10. And I apologize for putting all this little text on my slides, but I assume we'll be sharing the presentation with all of you. And I wanted to make it convenient for you to be able to find this information. So that's what that first URL is about, to find EPA's list 10. But definitely, I highly encourage, and the LEED rating system requires that the disinfectants are on EPA's list 10. But furthermore, it goes a step further, which is to define what a green option for a disinfectant would be, focusing on the various different active ingredients. And so there's a number of different active ingredients in there. And again, there's a URL to show what the EPA folks have identified is something that you can take a look at. And then, of course, there's all kinds of other products. And again, for paper, for trash bag liners, for vacuum cleaners and other stuff, LEED really does create a comprehensive roadmap. And for those of you on the call today who are facility managers, the cleaning industry, your distributors, your manufacturers should all be totally familiar with all of these things and should be able to help you sort through what the requirements are specific to cleaning. Obviously, we're going to talk about procedures. Procedures are always important, but one of the interesting things we learned from COVID was the issue of high-touch surfaces. You know, far too often we just clean based on tasks and frequencies, especially today with all the labor shortages. We need to apply resources on the surfaces and in the areas that matter most. And that's one of the things in LEED we're trying to articulate and to encourage people to follow. And then there's the issue of measuring cleaning performance. For those of you who joined the discussion, early, you probably heard a little banter between me and Dr. Robert Powitz, who is a brilliant forensic sanitarian. And forgive me, Bob, if I mispronounced your background, but he's a guy who spends time actually figuring out how illnesses spread in a facility and how to prevent them, and was instrumental in helping us develop this protocol. And candidly, we're going to look at other strategies that we can use to measure cleaning performance, and I'll talk about those later. But this URL that you see at the bottom of that bullet point is a really interesting approach to how to make using an ATP meter easy and, importantly, cost-effective. So it's an interesting strategy. And again, our goal is to focus resources on the things that matter most. The next part of it is we're certainly going to pay attention to our cleaning personnel, and beyond the proper PPE, we want a focus on ergonomics, because the leading cause of missed work days for custodial workers are related to ergonomics. It's not the chemicals they're using. It's ergonomics, backache, shoulder aches, knee problems, those kind of things that happen because, let's face it, cleaning is a physical activity. And so if our workers aren't feeling well, if their backs are hurting, they're moving more slowly, they're going to be more ineffective at doing their job. So we really want to highlight not just the importance of cleaning personnel, we want to go more than just giving lip service to that and start addressing some of the things that really can protect their health and, frankly, result in better outcomes for the occupants in our buildings. So once we've looked at the products and we figured out the personal protective equipment and the procedures, we put all of that together, and then we need to train our workers. And one of the things that LEED is trying to encourage is beyond just procedural things, beyond just here's how to clean a bathroom. They want to encourage us to train our workers to understand basic concepts about cleaning so that the workers can make more informed decisions about cleaning and protecting occupants' health. Far too many companies basically just turn the workers loose. They shadow someone for a day and they go clean. We need to do better. And helping to educate them is a major step forward. And this will create an incentive for providing better information, better training for our workers. And in LEAD, you see there's a few programs that they have recognized. The first two are part of SEIU, the Janitors Labor Union on the East and West Coast, and then with Building Service Contractors Association, which primarily will deal with non-unionized workers. So there's programs available for everyone, but other programs will work as well. But again, to make sure we're going beyond just the processes to really address the things that will help janitors make good decisions about cleaning. And then the final part of LEAD talks about occupant education. You know, I was looking online yesterday and they were talking about what's going on in China with COVID. And they're back to having people dressed in moon suits that are going through and spraying disinfectants on the streets and the sidewalks again. Remember those days? And we all know that that's basically a total waste of time, money, energy, and there's other environmental and other concerns associated with spraying disinfectants everywhere, especially when we know COVID is primarily transmitted through inhalation. So we want to avoid hygiene theater and make sure that we're doing things that are appropriate, yet at the same time, our occupants need to know that cleaning is taking place. And you see, I just have some examples on the screen, little simple checklists that you can share with people. You know, like you see them on the bathroom doors in restaurants all the time, where a worker signed their initials, the time they did it, so that we know that it was actually cleaned. And have you ever wondered why we don't put those same kind of documents in break rooms, in conference rooms, why we don't tell janitors, especially when we're cleaning at night, to show them that we actually cleaned someone's office or cleaned a bathroom. So this occupant education, especially when people are worried and concerned. And of course, that's not everybody, but with a little bit of effort, we can help those who are concerned, and we can get them to participate in helping us clean our offices, clean our buildings. And I don't mean necessarily physically cleaning. We're not going to ask, you know, a building occupant to go clean the bathrooms. But what we can do is ask them to clean up the mess in their own office so that we can actually clean it. And I'm sure you all have stories about going into office space where every square inch of every horizontal surface has a book, a box, a file on it, stuff everywhere. And of course, we tell people, our workers, not to touch anything. So inevitably, they really don't clean. They empty the trash and that's about it. We need to get our occupants to actually understand how important cleaning is. And because all the buildings are connected through the HVAC system, what happens in one office is spread everywhere through the building. So everyone has to participate to maximize the opportunity to create a healthy environment for all building occupants. And we need to engage the occupants to do that. And LEAD is a good way to help encourage it because it really is foundational to best practices for cleaning, right? It's not just about the products, it's about all these other things taken together that will create a healthy building. And some of the future improvements, and this is where I talked about the work that we're doing with Bob, you know, in LEAD, there will be now a credit relative to measuring contamination using an ATP meter. We'll actually be able to objectively determine, did they get that stuff off of the surface? Now, ATP meters won't tell whether the stuff that's left behind is dead or alive, but It helps us understand if there's still contaminants on the surface, right? That's what cleaning is. We're removing contaminants from the surface. We're removing unwanted soils and germs and other things from the surface. So an ATP meter will actually help us measure that there's stuff there or the lack of stuff there. In 2022, it's about time we do more than just visually inspecting cleaning performance, because it's the things we cannot see that harm health. But some of the other things that we're trying to take a look at is, when people use concentrated traditional disinfectants and they dilute them with a dilution control system, we assume that it's diluting it properly. I don't think people understand how inaccurate those devices are. They're close enough. They're close, sort of. Do we know? You know that you can get a test strip for 5 cents that you can stick in the NU solution to determine whether or not it was diluted properly? And those devices are affected by water pressure and temperature and other external factors. And we should just measure this stuff. So we're looking at building that kind of measurement strategy and developing a protocol to help everyone do it properly. Why aren't we measuring the slipperiness of floors? Those meters, those devices they're available. Every year, something like 230,000 people are injured when they slip on floors. Yet we're not testing it or measuring it. How about our vacuum cleaners using particle counters? Or, how do we change mop bucket water? There are devices, turbidity meters that can be stuck in the mop bucket water. So we don't say just dump the water after 3 rooms or 30 rooms. We can actually put it in there because if somebody threw up or if there was a spill. We need to figure out how to objectively determine how we're cleaning and to make sure we're not just sloshing dirt around. And of course, using other technologies like sensors to help us understand where people are in our buildings. If you have a big conference room and only one person uses it, do we need to clean it? If that same conference room has 100 people in it, that might be different.
Steve, there's a question, sorry to interrupt you. There's a quick question regarding the ATP. One of it is, can the ATP also be used to determine when to charge the mop bucket or when to change the mop bucket, I think the person meant?
An ATP meter will swab a surface and then measure the contaminants from that. So I'm not sure. I suspect if we used it in a mop bucket, it would probably be problematic.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what it's designed for. I don't think it works well with wet surfaces like that and moisture like that. But it's something that would be interesting to take a look at.
Yeah, and I think another follow-up question to that is ATP measures relative cleanliness, correct? And not the bacteria or any pathogens on the surface. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think of it as a surrogate for the soils on a surface, a surrogate for what's on the surface, right? It doesn't tell us if it's bacteria, if it's inorganic dust, soot from, vehicular exhaust. It doesn't tell us what this stuff is. It just tells us that there was stuff there. And of course, it's measuring an enzyme in living cells. But that stuff is everywhere. So if it's on the surface, it's not the only thing that's there. There's lots of stuff there. ATP will just show us that there's stuff there. Now, there's other kind of science and technologies if we needed to speciate the organisms or to figure out what's on it. We can do tape lifts and all kinds of stuff. But ATP meters, once you buy the meter, a swab will cost $2 or $3. You get the results in 15 seconds. So it's a good surrogate to be able to give us a sense if there's stuff on the surface, although we don't know really what that stuff is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And please, Sid, please feel free to interrupt. I hope it's helpful.
Thank you.
All right, let's rock and roll. So before we leave the section on LEED, I suspect some of you are hearing about the well building rating system. Let me frame it this way. And I serve on a technical committee from WELL, so I feel pretty comfortable talking about its requirements. But the way I want to frame it for all of you is WELL is the new kid on the block. And especially their timing was great with COVID because it focuses on wellness. And it focuses on wellness beyond just how we think about health. There's things in there about mental health and other kind of things that affect occupant behavior, occupant performance. But it is the new kid on the block. And you see sort of the little image that I posted there. I don't know if you folks have seen their advertisements on television, but when you can get people like the actor Michael B. Jordan or Lady Gaga or Jennifer Lopez or Robert De Niro to be able to talk about these kind of things, to me, you've hit a home run, right? If we want to really bring it to the general public, man, these guys have figured out how to do it. And if you haven't seen their commercial, you'll see the little YouTube URL below there. It's pretty impressive. I want Jennifer Lopez to do a television commercial on green cleaning for us. We'll keep our fingers crossed. But again, the focus is on wellness. And the main thing is, if you're doing green cleaning that meets the requirements of LEED, you'll meet the requirements of WELL. And that's just the simple way to describe it. From a cleaning perspective, doing LEED, doing green cleaning, you're doing a good program, you'll meet the WELL requirements. Okay, so now let's get into sustainability, the second half of the presentation. And, the first part of all of this is I really want to try to make a case that the world has changed. And candidly, that we're wobbling. It's like that plate, it's like we're putting enough pollution in the air, pollution in the water, we're extracting enough materials, climate change, all these things, and we're wobbling. That's where we're seeing all these incredible impacts in our environment. And to further illustrate this, when my grandparents were born around 1900, there were only about 1.75 billion people on the planet. And that was after thousands of years of human history. We finally got up over 1 billion people. By the time I was born in 1955, we were about 2.75 billion. So we increased by 1 billion people in 50 years, right? It took thousands of years to get to 1 billion. Took 200 years to get to about 2 billion. Took 50 years to get to 2 billion. And then today, we're already at 7.75 billion on our way to 10 billion. And what's also important about this chart is the blue area. Those are developing countries. Because if you look at the yellow line, the growth rate, the population growth rate in the developed world, the United States, Europe, what have you, is growing very slowly. All the growth is in developing countries. They're in countries like this. And the point I want to make about this, as global affluence is growing, the people who live here, they don't want to ride bicycles. They want to drive cars just like us. They don't want to live in shanties like that. They want to live in decent housing. They want to have running water. They want to have televisions. They want to have iPhones. As affluence grows, the world is going to continue to change, and the acceleration is just increasing rapidly. And other things that have changed. 100 years ago, there really were little family farms. That's not what happens today. On the left, this is how we industrially grow meat. And the waste from that and the impacts from that, significantly different from 100 years ago, or how we do agriculture that is so dependent on chemicals. And please, I've spent my life in the chemical industry. I'm not the guy that's complaining and that's hateful on chemicals. It's been amazing to my life, to my career, to my family. But we need to accept the fact that some are problematic and troubling, and we use a lot of it. It's changing our world. How we, for hundreds, actually thousands of years, when people mined, they did it with a shovel and a pick by hand. Now we have these devices that each of those tooths on that big wheel on the left side is enough to fill an entire dump truck. When we fish for thousands of years, literally, we basically fished with a pole or a small net. Now we have such technology, 5 of the 7 major world fisheries are being depleted because we catch so much and the natural systems aren't fast enough to grow things. And then we can talk about, how we harvest fibers for our toilet paper and paper towels, the impacts on the environment, what we're doing with water, in places that have no water, and our ability to be able to do things. Our world is changing. Impacts from mining, the impacts from manufacturing, energy production. We are affecting our planet. And it's not just about forest fires in the West. The picture on the right is one recently taken of a tornado in the Southeast. We're wobbling. And these kind of changes are happening faster and with more intensity. That's the reality of the world we're seeing today. And the real thing that we have to come to terms with, whether we like it or not, is the unintended consequences of our advances and our population and our affluence, right? No company wanted anyone to die. No company is trying intentionally to poison anyone. No one. But there are unintended consequences, things we didn't realize that we have to address, or our children and our grandchildren will be forced to deal with it, and it'll be even harder for them to address it. So as you could assume, I believe in this issue of climate change. I care deeply about it. And I hope at least you can agree that the world has changed, if for no other reason that we got a lot more mouths to feed and got to figure out how to do it. But from a business perspective, the real reason that businesses need to pay attention to sustainability is because they're starting to pay attention to it. And you can see this chart that over the last less than 10 years, 12 years, the change in sustainability reporting from the largest companies in the US, right? The S&P 500. Today, over 90% of the companies are reporting on their sustainability efforts. It's happening. And they're starting to ask their suppliers to do the same thing. So whether you believe in all the sustainability and green stuff or not, your customers, your investors are interested and concerned. And perhaps the greatest reason to pay attention to sustainability is it's happening. This sustainability reporting, the SEC, just a number of weeks ago, stated that they're developing reporting requirements for publicly traded companies. It's going to be a requirement. So the question for everyone is, if you know something's happening, I was talking to a friend of mine, Alan Hershkowitz, who is the founder of the Green Sports Alliance, just the other day, and he was kind of pissed off because they were talking about sustainability not being, he's talking to one of his clients, sustainability isn't a must-have. Sustainability is a nice to have. And Alan was all pissed off. And I said, Alan, you know what? The truth is he's right. It's not required today. It's not. But what, 2 years, 5 years, it will be required. So if you're a good business person and you know it's coming, do we make efforts to begin laying the foundation to do the work? Do we do that today? Or do we literally wait until it's a law when if you don't do it, you're going to have repercussions about it? This is happening. And please know, this isn't just Steve Ashkin's opinion. This is really happening. The SEC is going to require standardized sustainability reporting. And those companies are going to be required to ask their vendors for information as well. It's happening. So let's define what it is we're talking about. I see sustainability in this way. Green is about a product or service, right? We're looking at the health and environmental impacts of a product or service compared to other products and services used for the same purpose. That's what green is, right? We look at environmental impacts. We have a little focus on the direct impacts to the users of the products. It's great. It's an important advancement. But sustainability focuses on the organization that made that product. To me, there is no such thing as a sustainable product. It doesn't exist. There are green products, but sustainability is also going to incorporate what the company did and how the company operates that made that product, right? And what sustainability also will ultimately focus on is transparency. So we really do know what they're doing. So when we usually hear about sustainability, we see definitions like this. You know, the Brundtland Commission meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs, right? You probably have heard that. Or you've probably heard the great law of the Iroquois Confederacy. In our every deliberation, we must consider the impacts of our decisions on the next 7 generations. And I think from an ethos perspective, they're right on target. They're telling us we got to pay attention to what we're doing today because it's going to affect the future. And we have to think about that. But also when I was talking to Alan, I told Alan, you know, I've been hearing about the Brundtland Commission for going on 30 plus years since I've been working on green stuff. And we've been talking about this definition for 30 plus years, 40 years. People don't get it. They don't get it. It hasn't worked for all these years. So why should we assume it's going to work going forward? You know, what's the definition of insanity? You know, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. I propose we need a different definition for sustainability. And here's what I'd like to propose. The sustainability is simply a business strategy. It's a business strategy, but it's a business strategy for a specific segment of industry or organizations. And I call them generational organizations. Okay, so bear with me. What I mean by that is there's lots of strategies. There's lots of ways to make money. And it's not just about making money. Nonprofits have the same issues. Universities, governments, right? They just call it a budget. They're not interested about a profit. It's a service that they can accomplish with a specific budget. But the bottom line is there's different strategies. There's criminal activities. They just steal stuff. But there's also transactional strategies where it really is just making a buck. So people on Wall Street who are day traders, they know nothing about the companies they buy. It's can they make a buck? They don't care who the CEO is. They don't care about the product. They don't care about the community where the organization exists. If they can make a buck, they buy it, they sell it. End of discussion. It's totally transactional. There's nothing personal about it. There's others, exploitive. You know, they take stuff when they can, they use it all up, they move on to the next place. No long-term commitment. They're just there to make a buck. We see that in the fishery industry. We see that in some natural resource industry. They exploit the resources. When it's all consumed, they leave. Frankly, oftentimes they declare bankruptcy and they leave it up to the government to clean up the mess that they left behind. There's companies that are short-term oriented. Did you know that the median tenure of a CEO at a S&P 500 company is only 5 years. 5 years. That's part of the challenge that we have. They think about 5 years. They're going to be gone in 5 years. So maybe they're not concerned about the future. And then there's generational companies. companies like family businesses, companies that have brands that have been around for 100 years, organizations, public organizations, universities, governments, those who are here to stay, where they actually care about their communities. They care about the future. It's part of their mission. So that's why I talk about sustainability as a business strategy for generational organizations. It is not for everyone, but it's a good strategy for those who are concerned about the long-term success of their organization and ultimately of our people and planet. So the last few things. There's a number of things we follow: ESG, environmental, social, and governance for the roadmap. We can have another program on that to get into a lot more details about it. But those are the basic reporting requirements. And then finally, I felt I wanted to just share a future issue just in case you hear it. And it's the concept of restorative. So we've talked about green, and I think of green as doing less harm. You know, products are safer. When we talk about sustainable, we're saying do no harm, right? That's why we hear things like net zero or zero waste or climate neutral. It's to do no harm, net zero. But in the future, and this is maybe out 10 or 20 years, but the concept of restorative is that we need to fix the problems that we've caused. It admits that there's a deficit, and we need to pay that back. Somehow we need to repair the harm. But again, that's probably 10 to 20 years out, but I just wanted to share that with you in case that term comes up. So finally, things that you can do. Obviously, please buy greener products. And for all of you that are listening in today, I have to say, I love the technology from GenEon. I hope you'll take a look at it. Those on-site generators have a substantial reduction in environmental impacts compared to conventional or traditional cleaning chemicals. It eliminates all the extraction of raw materials, all the ingredients and efforts that went into making the packaging, of making the products, of transporting the products. These on-site generators really are the next step in the green chemical movement. Beyond that, so that's easy. And not just about cleaning product, buy green office supplies, buy greener food. There are options. Look for the ones that further reduce impacts on health and the environment. In your organizations, create or participate in a green or sustainability team. You can't do this on your own. So you got to really engage others if you really want to be successful. The first thing you do, however, is you got to benchmark where you're starting, right? You can make a map. You know, if you want to get to Chicago, it makes a difference whether you're starting in New York or you're starting in Los Angeles. So we need a benchmark, a baseline that'll tell us here's where we are. And initially, you're going to have to look at your energy stuff, your consumption and use of water, the waste you're producing. And of course, you should look at the percentage of green products. So you can track where you are and determine where you're going. And ultimately, you're going to report on this and drive improvements. And as it says, sustainability is a journey. It's not a destination. We have a long way to go, but it's a great road to travel because when you start measuring these things and you start improving them, it will save money, right? When we use less energy, when we use less fuels, we save money and we're improving the environment. So it's a great business strategy. And so I want to leave you with this comment. And please forgive me for reading this. I'm a huge fan of Steve Jobs. I had the opportunity to get to know him. My older brother was an early Apple person and a good friend of Steve Jobs. And if you don't mind, allow me to read this to you. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the only thing you cannot do is ignore them because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius, because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. So thank you very much for your time. And I really do hope together we can change the world. So with that, thank you. And if for the few minutes we have left, Sid, do you have any questions?
Well, I want to thank everybody for participating in the webinar. We do have a few minutes, as Steve said, so we'll open up this time for any questions that anybody have. Or if you don't want to ask questions, you can write it in the chat box, or you can send it to me at sid.williams@geneontech.com, and I'll be more than happy to respond to those questions. So feel free to unmute your mic and ask any questions that you may have.
Hey, Stephen, this is Matt Laverne with Douglas County in the state of Georgia and Metropolitan County Government, or Metro Atlanta. Just wanted to say what a great webinar and learning experience this was. I learned a few new things and excellent presentation, and you've given me a lot to think about. As Douglas County continues to grow at its exponential rates, I got to get on board here and get this organization heading that way too. We've been working on it for years through COVID, and I believe you're right. This is the new way of doing business. So thank you.
Matt, well, first of all, thank you for spending an hour with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you. And if there's anything we can do to help you, it would be our pleasure to do that.
Thanks, Matt. There's a question that came in, Steve. I'm just going to read it to you. Would you expand on your thoughts about social equity and governance opportunities to accelerate sustainability in the cleaning industry?
Certainly. Let's see here. There we go. I had some of these slides in here. I was a little bit concerned about the time. Obviously, everyone gets the environmental stuff, and I talked about that a bit because that's easy and it easily saves money. But when we think about social impacts, we're really thinking about our people. And we really want to know about things like diversity and inclusion and all of those kind of things. If there's programs about hiring women or veterans or people with disabilities, we want to understand who the people are that are making those products. And you'll see in governance, I have eliminating illegal contracting, which is a big problem in the cleaning industry as far as I'm concerned. But also in the social area, I don't want to be buying products, no matter how green they are, that are made by slave or child labor. Right? And I think everyone on this call would agree with that. But how do we know? The products work great. How do we know? That's what we're trying to figure out. We want to look at the human resources issues. We just want to know. We're not saying one is good or one is bad, but so that purchasers and the community citizens, they'll have the information to understand what's going on, and they can place their own values, their own weight on each of these things. So social, we're going to look at human resources. We're going to look at occupational health and safety. We're going to look at our impacts on the community. Right? Community is not just a bunch of buildings. It's about the people and the environment we create for them. And how do we think about our communities? How do we measure our impacts on communities? And in governments, obviously, we're going to be concerned about financial performance. But then these other things, there are bad companies out there. And while I believe that 99% of companies are good, there are some bad ones. And they hurt all the good ones. So we really want to understand, how do they conduct business? Are they paying bribes? In a lot of developing countries, that's a given. It's not right. It's not helpful. We got to start addressing these things. So that's what the ESG is looking at, the environmental stuff as well as social and governance. And sometimes it's harder to put a dollar value on some of these things, but we can track stuff like philanthropy, hours of volunteerism. There's plenty of things that we can still track. And that's what we're all trying to figure out. And this is all new. We're figuring this out now. So the very good question, and thank you for asking it. And yeah, I appreciate it.
Abel, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a quick question on the market acceptability of ECA, hypochlorous acid, the green clean, and what has been for you guys the hardest obstacle to get the market public opinion to switch from conventional chemical cleaning to this more green ECA technology? What has been the hardest thing, in your opinion, about making that switch at the customer level?
Yeah, and for us, for GenEon, I think, and for a number of my distributors on this call, I think they would agree to the answer to this is that initial cost. So when you present ECA technologies, there's an investment that needs to be made up front by whoever's procuring that product. And typically what people do is they make that comparison in their head to a bottle of glass cleaner, and it just doesn't make sense to them. So what we have to do, and it's basically educational on our part, is we have to, explain to them, educate them about the benefits that ECA bring outside of the cost per gallon. And that's one of the biggest things. One of the things that customers who have adapted ECA technology or on-site generated technologies, one of the things that they realize in their first year, and we have numerous examples of this, is that they achieve so much savings in other areas. Savings, things like reduced workers' comp claims, things like reduced inventory space for chemicals, things like improved attendance, of students in school. Employees are not getting sick, they're showing up to work, right? The shipping costs for chemicals, the chemicals into their facility. Surfaces are not being damaged. So these are all the kind of savings that they start to see over a period of time. And these people, the users who adapt the technology, they become some of the biggest advocates actually for ECA technology and for on-site generating technology. So it's that shift, right, from getting from where you are in the traditional chemicals to the on-site generation. But once they make that shift, they become huge advocates, and some of them even become evangelists for the technology. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Sid, if you don't mind, I just want to share a couple of thoughts. My observation is, one, change is hard. Oftentimes people don't want to change. Change takes work. They're going to have to retrain their workers. What they're doing is working. Nobody's complaining. So, change is hard. Overcoming that inertia is just hard, right? It has nothing to do with the product. Change is hard. Sometimes people don't do what's good for them because change is hard. And if I can say this, and I hope I don't alienate too many people, there's far too many distributors in our industry that don't want to take on this on-site generation of chemicals because they fear that they're going to lose money. They're happy selling traditional chemicals where every month their customer is going to buy more, right? So there's a lot of distributors don't want to do that. They fear that it just cannibalizes their own business, and they don't want to move to the next generation, and they're just not willing to do it. And so for those of you who are distributors of GenEon's products, I applaud you. Thank you for having the courage and the willingness to demonstrate your leadership. So thank you. And for those of you who are still buying the old stuff and they don't want to sell this new stuff, just understand what the rationale is. And some of you may be so small, it may not be necessary, or it may not be cost effective, but I think that GenEon seems to have a number of different products that will meet any size facility. So, these things work. They've been proven to work. They're better for the environment. And I hope you'll consider them if you're not already doing it.
Thanks, Steve.
Let me chime in here, if I might, I loved your presentation, Steve. I think that's wonderful. I have one foot in the regulatory community as a sanitarian. And when we speak about sustainable products, there are two things that raise their ugly head. I think the one is the regulatory community itself. Things like GenEon that make hypochlorous acid under 40 CFR is basically exempt from listing up until 400 parts per million. And it works like any other chlorine product, except it's safe, it's non-corrosive, and so on. But the regulatory community says, well, if it's not EPA listed as a disinfectant, we've got a problem. So it's an education. We're facing a stiff uphill battle educating the regulatory community. The second thing that I find as a roadblock is the legal community. If you're dealing with, and I work with institutions, mostly institutional environmental health and safety. You have their legal counsel will say, we have to be assured if we get sued. And as a result, the green industry, what I call the green industry, has not been vocal enough to advance the safety and the efficacy of the alternate products, such as electrolyzed water, such as steam, such as ozone, such as hydrogen peroxide, and all the other ones that are grouped in there, and particularly the on-site generation of sanitizing agents. And that, I think we have to sooner or later, and I reach out to you, Sid, and the industry, sooner or later, we have to come up with a conference that is large enough and vociferous enough that we can advance all these good things and educate the public, educate the legal community, educate the regulator. It's not an easy thing to do. As you know, I write quite a bit, but I can't, finding the audience or finding where to publish these things in is difficult. And if it's not read, it's not used.
Right. Agree with you 100%, Bob. Yep. And it has been a challenge. And as you know, we've worked together for a long time. It's been a challenge for a number of years. It's getting a little bit better, but it's still a challenge. So 100% in agreement. Well, folks, we are over our time, and I want to respect everybody's times. So we're going to end this here. Thank you so very much for participating in the webinar. And if you have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is syd.williams@geneontech.com. And thank you so very much. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Bye.